Take a slow breath. Let the quiet wrap around you like a silk kimono in early spring. Tonight we drift far from the clamor of the modern world, into a distant time where stillness and silence were not luxuries, but rules. A world where lives were lived, not in the pursuit of pleasure or personal voice, but in the shadow of duty. Feudal Japan is often remembered for its iconic warriors, the samurai, with their lacquered armor, glinting swords, and solemn codes of honor. But we won't begin with their glory. No, not tonight. Instead, we begin behind them, beneath them. Beneath the polished wood floors, the endless rituals, and the solemn oaths were the hands that kept the system upright. The servants. Tonight we trace the quiet burdens of those who stood one step behind the sword, whose silence was expected, whose movements were watched, whose lives, were not their own. Close your eyes if you'd like. Let the world fall away, and picture the wooden walls of a small household compound. The flicker of a single oil lamp, the hushed sound of sandals on packed dirt. You are now entering feudal Japan, not as a warrior, but as the one who bows when the warrior enters the room. Imagine yourself waking before dawn. The sun hasn't yet touched the paper screens of your master's house, but already your body aches from yesterday's tasks, the chopping, the kneeling, the endless polishing. You sleep not in a room of your own, but in the narrow servants' quarters at the edge of the compound. The floor is hard. The air is cold. And yet your first thought upon waking is not of yourself. It is of him, the Bushi, your samurai master. Everything revolves around his needs. Before he stirs, you have already prepared the charcoal fire and the small hearth. The water must be heated for tea. His swords? Yes, both of them must be cleaned, polished, and placed precisely where he expects them. Not an inch too far to the left. Not a degree tilted the wrong way. Perfection isn't requested. It is assumed. Every gesture, every footstep must be measured. You must bow as you pass his room, even if the sliding screen is closed. Even if you are unsure whether he's awake, the hierarchy is rigid, and your place is never in question. You speak only when spoken to. You move only when permitted. And your errors, should you make them, are corrected with severity. Punishment could be physical, yes. A swift cuff to the head, strike with the back of a fan. But more often it was psychological. Silent stare, a cold shoulder. A note passed to another servant, indicating your shame. The pressure to never fail was relentless. And the fear of dishonor, not only to yourself, but to the household, could wear down even the strongest resolve. The samurai class lived by Bushido, the way of the warrior. Honor, loyalty, self-discipline. But servants lived under that same code without the sword, and without the status. If your master was displeased, you were expected to show contrition, deep bows, apologies spoken in carefully measured tones. Some households required symbolic acts of shame, the donning of plain robes, eating separately, kneeling outside for hours in the rain. And this was the best-case scenario. If your master was just... In some cases, a failed servant could be dismissed. Not with severance, not with thanks, but with disgrace. Expelled from the household, you might carry that dishonor to your next post. If you found one. Your name, your family's name, could be stained for generations. And then there was the hierarchy within the household. You were not simply a servant, you were part of a ranked system. The kitchen girl answered to the cook, who answered to the house steward. The stable boy served beneath the gatekeeper, who in turn answered to the samurai's brother-in-law, who held a bureaucratic post in the province. Even among the powerless, there was a pecking order. Mistakes rolled downhill, and you were at the bottom. Your duties might include carrying night soil, the euphemism for human waste, to the compost pits, scrubbing armor plates that hadn't been used in years, running messages between distant relatives, or sitting for hours, simply waiting, in case your master decided to ask for something. Anything. Meals, eaten in silence, rest, brief, and never private. Praise, rare and fleeting. There were occasional perks, a glimpse of the master's poetry collection, or a leftover cup of plum wine on New Year's. But even those were reminders. You were permitted to be near beauty, but never to own it. And yet, it continued. Day after day, because this was life. And the alternative, The chaos outside the walls, the peasant rebellions, the wandering Ronin, the hunger, was often worse. The servant's burden was invisible. It was never supposed to be noticed. So you kept your head bowed, your robe clean, your voice low. You lived in the shadow of the sword. No W, let the candle flicker a little lower. Let the wooden corridors of your mind stretch longer and darker, like a hall in an old provincial mansion, still save for the quiet echo of sandals brushing against tatami. Our second tale is not imagined. It is remembered, retold again and again in schools, shrines, and solemn winter plays. It is the story of loyalty, not the kind spoken loudly, but the kind endured silently. A slow-burning devotion, wrapped in silence and snow. It begins, like many Japanese stories, with an insult. In the year 1701, during the peaceful Edo period, a young daimyo named Asano Naganori was summoned to the shogun's castle in the capital. He was not there to fight. The wars had ended. His task was ceremonial, to host an imperial envoy and learn the complicated court rituals demanded of such an occasion. Asano was a quiet provincial lord, not foolish, not proud, but untrained in the subtle games of court etiquette. To help him, the shogun's officials appointed a courtier, Kira Yoshinaka, a man older, more experienced, and more accustomed to the whispered currencies of flattery and bribes. Kira, it is said, expected gifts, lavish ones, and when they were not offered in sufficient measure, he grew cold, dismissive. He belittled Asano, mocked his efforts to learn the court customs, and, according to some accounts, humiliated him publicly. Day after day, Asano endured, but the pressure mounted. Honor is a delicate thing in the world of Bushido, not loud or boastful, but easily shattered. And then, it happened. In a corridor of Edo Castle, near the Pine Corridor where so many footsteps had echoed for generations, Asano drew his short blade and attacked Kira. Not fatally, not skillfully, but with intent. It was a shocking breach of conduct. To draw a weapon in the shogun's palace was forbidden, no matter the reason. For this, Asano was ordered to commit seppuku, ritual suicide. That same evening, his land was seized, his family name disgraced, and his samurai retainers, were cast out, became Ronin. Masterless warriors, adrift in a world that respected rank above reason. Most disbanded, but 47 of them did not. They waited. For over a year, they posed as beggars, drunkards, and merchants. They scattered, they endured insults, they aged, and always, they watched. Then, in the bitter snow of a December night, they struck. 47 men. Silently, swiftly. They stormed Kira's mansion, bypassed his guards, and found him hiding in an outhouse, trembling. He was offered the dignity of seppuku but refused, so they took his life. Then they marched to the grave of their former master and laid Kira's head before it. They did not run. They did not boast. They knelt and waited. Eventually the shogun ordered them all to commit seppuku, an act of mercy in a way. They were allowed to die with honor. Their graves now sit at Sengakuji Temple, a quiet place in Tokyo where incense curls into the winter air. Still, centuries later, people visit. They leave flowers, coins, notes written in careful brushstrokes. The story is told as one of honor, of patience, of justice executed not in rage, but in reverence. But if you look beneath the layers, beneath the retellings and stone markers, you'll find something else. A year of silence. A year of pretending. A year where 47 men carried the weight of a promise, without ever speaking its name, is not a tale of excitement. Not really. It is a slow unfolding, a careful descent. And like many things in feudal Japan, its strength was not in what was shown, but in what was withheld. Now leave behind the castles. Let the lacquered armor and polished floors of the samurai world dissolve quietly into mist. Let the drums of ritual and the silence of duty fade into the trees. We turn north now, to a colder place, a wilder place, the forest where the snow hangs heavy on ancient pines. Two rivers that weave, like silver ribbons through moss-covered stones. To the wind-swept coasts of Hokkaido and beyond. Here, before Japan was fully Japan, lived a people nearly forgotten. They did not build castles, did not write poetry in courtly Chinese characters, did not carry katanas or follow the codes of Bushido. They lived closer to the earth, and closer to something older. Let's step softly into their world. Imagine a village of low wooden huts with grass-thatched roofs, circled by a protective ring of ash to ward off spirits. Smoke rises from the chimneys, not thick, not black, but thin and blue, like a thread stitching sky to earth. Inside, the air smells of birch and fish oil. Furs are piled near the hearth, tools hang from the beams. Carving simple. Elegant mark the doorposts with flowing patterns like waves and winds. These are not decorations, they are prayers. The Ainu believed the world was alive with spirits, kamai, they called them. The bear, the owl, the fire and the hearth, all were beings deserving of respect. Each had a purpose, each had a voice. To hunt was not to conquer, but to make a request. When a bear was killed, it was done with ceremony. The animal's spirit was honored, its skull decorated, and its body used in full. Not out of fear, but reverence. And so they lived, fishing, hunting, carving, and remembering. Men wore robes woven from elm bark fiber. Women wore embroidered tunics stitched with patterns passed down through generations, spirals, curves, protective motifs to guard the body and soul. On their lips and hands, some bore blue tattoos, carefully inked over years, each line a rite of passage. There were no emperors here, no warlords, no walls. Just the rhythm of the seasons, the migration of salmon, the first bloom of wild garlic in spring, and stories, always stories. The Ainu had no written script, but they remembered in song. Long oral epics called yukar, sung in low voices around the fire, telling of gods who danced on mountaintops, of foxes who tricked and guided, of heroes who spoke with birds and married bears. These stories were not entertainment. They were instruction. They were memory. But the world changed. As Japan's central government extended its reach northward, the Ainu found their way of life slowly shrinking. Land was taken, language suppressed, traditions labeled as uncivilized. By the 19th century, many Ainu had been forcibly relocated or assimilated. The old gods were silenced. The songs went unsung. And yet, something remained. Today in parts of Hokkaido, some descendants still gather. Still speak fragments of the old tongue. Still carve bears in the traditional way. Still light sacred fires that have burned, unbroken for centuries. And if you listen closely, quietly, just beyond the crackle of flame and the whisper of the wind, you might still hear the echo of the yukar, drifting through the cedar trees. The Ainu were not samurai, not emperors, not shoguns, but they were a part of this land. Deep and quiet and ancient. And in the hush of their world, we are reminded that history is not always loud. Sometimes it is carried in silence, in smoke, in the curve of a carved line. Let us now return south, but not to toil, nor to warfare. We arrive instead in a place of hush and order, where nothing is rushed and every movement is a performance. The Shogun's court in Edo. It is the 18th century. Japan has closed its doors to the outside world. Peace reigns under Tokugawa rule. But behind this stillness is a rigid choreography, one you're about to step into. Imagine you are not a farmer, nor a samurai, but a minor noble, summoned to the Shogun's palace. The journey to Edo, now Tokyo, takes days. You travel by river barge and winding footpaths. When you arrive, you are not welcomed with fanfare, but silence. You are told to wait, and wait. In a side room, with polished cedar floors and the faint smell of sandalwood, you kneel for hours. You dare not shift. Behind the screens, attendants move like shadows, adjusting things just out of sight. Every element of this world, from the tilt of your head to the way your robe folds across your knees, has meaning. The court is not a place of power in the loud sense. It is a place of control, and that control is measured in rules, or hundreds of them. How deep to bow? How long to pause before speaking? Which word to use depending on the listener's rank, age, and family name? An error is not punished with violence. Not here, but with social death. a glance, a silence, a subtle shift in status that may take generations to repair. You are served tea, eventually. The ceremony is slow, deliberate, exquisite. The host enters. Every motion is purposeful, places the tools before him. Bamboo whisk, porcelain bowl, silk cloth. But the tea is not sweet. It is earthy, bitter, green. But the point is not the flavor. It is the act itself, the grace, the stillness. And around you, the palace breathes in hushed rhythms. Screens painted with golden cranes shimmer as the light shifts through narrow windows. Outside, the garden is raked into perfect lines, stone, moss, and water in harmony. Courtiers glide in silk robes, speaking in low tones. The air smells of camellias and pine. Even meals are ceremonies. A banquet does not erupt in laughter. It unfolds in near silence. Pickled vegetables. Tiny bites of grilled river fish. Rice steamed in lacquered boxes. Sake poured by rank, not by thirst. Servants appear and disappear with the quiet of falling petals, and beneath it all, the tension hums. You are constantly watched, not by eyes, but by expectations. Women of the court are bound by the same etiquette. Dressed in layers of embroidered silk, they must speak in indirect tones, kneel in specific postures, and express joy, sorrow, or fence with the smallest shift in fan, sleeve, or gaze. The beauty here is immense, but it is beauty with rules. Cherry blossoms are admired only briefly, as their very impermanence is their glory. The changing of seasons is celebrated with poetry, but only in approved forms and approved contexts. And while the city outside the palace grows, with merchants, noise, and invention within these walls, no, time feels still. Here, nothing is rushed, and nothing is truly free. Even the Shogun, the most powerful man in Japan, is bound by his lineage, by his advisors, by the ancient codes that built the court and would not bend. You leave Edo with gifts, yes. Fine cloth, perhaps a poem copied by a court scholar. But you also leave with the sensation of having lived inside a painting. Beautiful, immaculate, untouchable, and utterly exhausting. The court is a world of elegance. Yes, of floating sleeves and whispered verses, but beneath that, ... It is a cage built of silence. Let the tatami fade from beneath your feet. Let the last scent of incense trail off into nothing. You've wandered through 4 corners of feudal Japan, from dirt floors to sacred fires to polished halls. And now it is time to return home. And now, slowly, the doors close behind us. The tatami mats, the flickering lanterns, the moss-covered shrines, all soften into shadows, into memory. You've traveled far across the archipelago of time, not as a warrior or a ruler, but as an observer. Quiet, curious, steady, through the eyes of a servant bowing low each morning, aching in stillness, through the loyalty of men who waited a year to honor a promise no one could hear, through the songs of a forgotten people who never needed swords to shape their world, and through the whispered rituals of those who lived behind brocade screens, who measured power not in violence, but in silence. Feudal Japan is often remembered for its swords, its battles, its drama. But tonight, you've seen something gentler. The rhythm beneath the surface. The quiet dignity of those who endured. The hush of lives lived entirely in service to something larger, whether loyalty, tradition, or a carefully brewed cup of tea. And perhaps, as you lie there, drifting toward rest, you can sense a rhythm still, slow, like the beat of a temple bell in the distance, or the falling of cherry blossoms on a spring morning. Reminder that history, like sleep, does not come all at once. It arrives slowly, softly, on the back of stories whispered in the dark. So let the stillness take hold now. Let your breath slow. Let the images fade. You are not in a castle. You are not in a shrine. You are here, safe, warm, resting. Right. The night holds you just as it held them. And tomorrow, the world will wait. But for now, only the past remains, quiet, still, and gone.